Welcome to our latest podcast. As you know, I'm a corporate lawyer and have been working and living in the UAE for over 32 years. I work with a lot of founders, I work with a lot of family businesses, all the way from the Americas to Europe to the Middle East. We work in the UAE and all the GCC countries. Now, whenever we are planning new businesses, whenever we're planning new company setups, etc., founders and their families are usually not part of the equation. It's usually the founder with their joint venture partner or the founder with their investors, etc. Now, over a period of time, what I found is that when you set up a company, when you've really grown your business, what do you really worry about? You worry about a few things. You worry about the legacy of your business, who's going to take it over if something happens to you. You worry about the continuity of your business, of course, which is part of this legacy discussion. And then the third thing you really worry about is what happens to your family, especially if you're the only breadwinner of your family. And the reason I started working on inheritance law in the UAE is because I had all these corporate clients coming to me and saying, we need a solution. You understand our business, you understand the dynamics of our partnerships, you understand the dynamics of our family, and please advise us on what we should do next. A little bit about us. As I've said to you before, we are mainly corporate advisory boutique where we do a significant amount of corporate work and we do a lot of employment, joint ventures and real estate stuff, and we have a network of individuals and law firms around the GCC that help us, who are usually my ex-colleagues or ex-partners from my previous life and previous law firms. And then as a result of this, we also have other networks where I belong to the International Practice Group, which is an amazing group of tax accountants, lawyers, and people who do estate planning and things like that over 60 countries or so, which means we have an amazing network because our founders might be American nationals who set up their main business in London, but now have a huge branch of their business across the GCC countries. So when you're planning for inheritance issues and when you're planning for succession issues, you might have to take into consideration more than one country and more than one legal regime. So as I was mentioning before, the UAE is a civil law regime, and basically that did not recognize the concept of trust and did not really have wills available for non-Muslims. And it was only until the DIFC was founded and set up its will regime that really even expatriates like myself in the UAE started to register their wills. So that's just a bit of background. Let's talk about what we're going to cover in today's podcast. We're going to talk about the UAE inheritance framework. We're going to talk about wills and probate, as I said to you, all about enforceability, guardianship if you have young kids and you need to make some sort of provision for them. We're going to talk about governance structures and my experiences with family-owned businesses as well under this. We're going to talk about trusts, where they're used, how they differ from foundations. We're going to talk about sometimes my preference, which is holding companies. A lot of the businesses we work with don't always have the right legal structure, don't always have the right holding companies or structures. Again, with 9% corporate tax having been introduced in the UAE this last year, we are seeing a lot of companies moving their headquarters from the BVI, Guernsey, Jersey, Singapore, Mauritius, and certain other jurisdictions into the UAE so that they can actually take advantage of the 9% corporate tax. Otherwise, if you are managing your company out of the UAE and your company was somewhere else, you may still potentially be taxed in this country and that country. So those kind of complex double tax issues and agreements. And then we'll also talk about some of the costs and maintenance as part of the podcast. I'll send you pieces of these slides and you can have a look at these as well. So you can always contact us if you want more information, and then choosing the right vehicle for you. So let's go into the risks and why we're looking at wills and trusts and foundations and things like that. Generally, somebody dies in the UAE, their estate would be divided as per Islamic Sharia laws, and that was the case before the personal status law came into place. And as Sharia law can be relatively complicated, which means that inheritance is determined after funeral costs and outstanding debts have been cleared, and you basically have like almost a formula where your wife or your husband, if you're a female entrepreneur, owner, founder, or a person looking or reviewing this podcast, parents, children, whether they're sons or daughters, and then siblings in case you have no spouse, children, or parents. So this is kind of like a complex fixed distribution that's been set out under Islamic law and the policies of Islamic Sharia, and these were originally followed by the personal status courts. Now, only 1/3 of an estate can be allocated to non-heirs or charitable causes, which was also the issue, where basically there was no ability to will anything over if you were a Muslim. And then again, a non-Muslim couldn't inherit from you. And as I said to you, now the situation has moved on beautifully, where the Abu Dhabi courts and the Abu Dhabi Judicial Department has started accepting wills for Muslims, and this is only in the UAE. So this is a really interesting development, and one that I do ask a lot of our Muslim clients to take advantage of. What about non-Muslim law, and what happens to expatriates and non-Muslims living in the UAE, and how does this work? So we now have a personal status law that recognizes the fact that non-Muslims may will and may apply their home country rules if they wish to. So either the heir can apply their home country's laws for asset distribution unless you have a registered will, and here we've sort of you can divide up things as you wish. There's a default distribution if you didn't have your will but you were applying your country's policies, and then if you did have a will, then you can specify in a lot of detail what you want to have as asset distribution. And I advise all my non-Muslim clients to have a will in the UAE. Now, let me break this down from a practicality standpoint. Let me give you an example of a very big diamond merchant family that I advised some years ago, where the father was a Belgian national, had substantial assets in Belgium. They had holding companies in Singapore. They also had a big business where they were importing the diamonds into the UAE, and they had their stores in the Golden Diamond Park here and the Gold Souk here, a very well-known diamond brand. And they had a substantial amount of family properties and inherited properties also in India before the father's generation had moved to Belgium, because a lot of the diamond merchants settled down in Belgium many years ago. So when the father passed away, we ended up in a position where we had actually done a DIFC will for the father. That's the Dubai International Financial Center will, where we had registered the will in the DIFC. And what we found was not only was the probate process really efficient, really super quick, and very reasonable in the DIFC, we were also able to use that probate as evidence in Singapore, because there were so many complications to the situation of the company and the owners, etc., of this particular business and family in Singapore, because there was also a bit of a family dispute, as there often is in the businesses I advise. There might be a brother or a cousin in another jurisdiction that you want to safeguard from. So he had also advised this particular client, because of the net worth, being such a high net worth individual, to also have different wills in different countries. Now, I say this again because many of you watching this are expatriates, or listening to this are expatriates in the UAE. You will find that you might have a property back home in the UK, or you might have a couple of homes in the US, or you might have homes in India or the Philippines or wherever. And you want to safeguard that. And generally, the law of the land applies to property. So property law goes by the law of the land, what we call lex situs in law in Latin, and then your bank accounts, your cash, etc., can potentially be governed by a will of another country or a will registered in another country. But I do advise, if you have a substantial amount of assets in a particular country, you do a will for each of those countries, and they can be simple wills, and I'll go into that in a minute as well. So just to give you a little bit of an idea. Now, as I said, non-Muslims can register their wills, and parents can appoint legal guardians for their minor children. So for example, me, I don't really have any family living with me in the UAE at the present moment. So when I did my wills, I appointed a local guardian, because I have a daughter and a son. And for the daughter, I needed to ensure, and while my son was a minor, we needed to ensure that there was another female guardian available locally until such time as the main guardian that I had appointed in my will, who was my older sister, was able to fly into the UAE to take over this role or position. So again, the DIFC and the ADGN have great framework for guardianship to protect minor children and keep them safe and secure if something did happen. And unfortunately, I see many parents who do have minor children also tend to take holidays together, fly to weddings together, fly to funerals together, or take trips together, which is risky because if both parents do pass away at the same time, then the children they need to have a really strong guardianship in place. So these are some comparisons of wills where basically there are 3 types of will regimes in the UAE. One is what we call the onshore court wills, where you can register with the UAE civil courts, and it's governed by the UAE civil law. If you want a different law to apply, there is a small danger that Sharia law can apply. And I always tell everybody that please do not rule out. It seems like a cheaper option because a lot of people would spend a lot of business structuring their companies, buying assets, acquiring new businesses. But I'm always amazed how people tend to cut corners when it comes to themselves and when it comes to protecting their family, and they fund maybe the cheapest, quickest, easiest, what they perceive as the cheapest, quickest, easiest way to set up some sort of will regime or some sort of succession planning for them and their family. And I do advise that that's not necessarily always the right thing. It may be in some cases, but not in all cases. And obviously, this type of onshore court wills is in a standard civil court format. It doesn't have that much flexibility, and it primarily covers UAE assets only. And if somebody did die, if you did have a will under the onshore court wills process and you did pass away, your family would have to employ a local advocate to file for probate in the local court. So whilst it's cheap at the outset, it could turn out to be more expensive for your successors at the end of the process. Let's look at the DIFC wills, where you basically file the will with the DIFC and the probate registry in Dubai. Yes, THINC and me, we had to do a rigorous test to be able to undertake will drafting. This structure of the DIFC wills is also similar to the Abu Dhabi Global Market wills, which is the third option, which I'll come to in a minute, and it has very clear succession rules for non-Muslims and very high certainty. I do advocate this, as you can probably understand, and it avoids any sort of Sharia issues that could arise, which forces any sort of heirship in the case of non-Muslims. It covers UAE assets. As I said, it could extend to global assets. I do not recommend you add properties that are not locally based in such a will. And the format of the will, just to give you a feel of it, is relatively simple. We also do what we call mirror wills, which is husband and wife have a similar will where husband gives everything to the wife and the wife gives everything to the husband, and the wills sort of mirror each other in terms of their intention and the way they are drafted. So it normally just declares you're not a Muslim and that you're making this will in your sound mind and for your own free will, etc. And then basically setting out what you give to whom. And again, I advise clients not to go into a lot of detail into what they're giving. So for example, my Cartier bracelet to my cat, or my Tiffany necklace to my dog, or all of my Hermes Birkin handbags to my daughter-in-law, or whatever. You do not need to be this specific, because then things could change. The Cartier bracelet might get stolen, or you might sell all your Birkins, God forbid, but you may not have those particular things that you said you would give to people. So unless it's a particular fund or a fixed deposit that's in place for a particular year, or beneficiary under some sort of other banking relationship or system, I don't advise you to be specific. I do advise everyone to then keep a schedule of all their Cartier bracelets, Hermes Birkins, and all their important account numbers and properties and things all on an Excel sheet or some other format, which is then also kept with the physical form of your will. And I have several of them in my safe. Oh yes, and another point on wills is you do need an executor. Again, I advise that the executor is not the person who's a beneficiary under your will. It could be another family member, it could be a trusted lawyer, or it could be an accountant or something like that. Somebody who's close to the family, has no real agenda, in relation to the property and to the accounts and the money of the family, but is somebody who's a well-wisher and is equipped to handle it. Because remember, if somebody did die, you would also be in a huge grieving process, and you need to make sure the executor is somebody who has their head on their shoulders at that particular kind of very stressful and very difficult time. And then the last option is, as I said, the ADGM will, where again it's English common law with foreign judges, fully recognized, similar to the DIFC wills, and again can cover global assets, but depending on whether that's recognized or not. So that's a lot about wills. I've already talked about the legal framework. Muslims need to go to their personal status court. I've also worked with many Muslim families where if you have minor children, then the Awqaf is very heavily involved, the Office of Islamic Affairs, etc., very heavily involved in the management of your children, because they do not want the widow or to dwindle away the wealth, so they do try to safeguard the children. So if you have a local sponsor, this is why if all of the succession planning, all of this knowledge always comes back down to businesses and how you're operating in the UAE. Because if you have a local sponsor in your business who continues to own 51% of the shares, like the old corporate law, or even a local sponsor of your branch office or whatever, you want to make sure that that local sponsor has a company that's owned by him or has some safeguards, because if he does die, you're inheriting his entire family as your next local sponsor, and we've had that happen to us many times. It can be a seamless process, but it can also be a long and arduous process because you may have issues with signature authority and things like this. So that's another thing to safeguard. And for non-Muslims, you have the non-Muslim inheritance department, as I said, in the courts, and the non-Muslim family court overseeing inheritance cases in the case of Abu Dhabi, and then the DIFC and ADGM frameworks. Right, now let's talk about foundations. Foundations has become a bit of a fashion, if I can call it that, foundation fashion, where there's a legal structure that's now available in our financial free zones of the UAE, where you have a legal entity with its own personality, like a company, but without shareholders. You can combine the features of a company and a trust. So you have a separate legal entity and you have asset management. It's generally used for wealth management and succession planning and asset protection. Now, the reason it became quite the rage, as I said, foundation fashion, is also because it was a way for Muslims to sort of have succession planning around their businesses and around their families at first, but then also now many big business families and many other families that have multiple partnerships, etc., have decided, or big assets. I have one family that has significant number of assets in Jabal Ali Free Zone and in Kizad in Abu Dhabi, and they're building more and more of these warehouses and logistics facilities and things like that, and they decided that they wanted to have a proper charter and a foundation. And the foundation charter is very specific. I'll get to that in a minute. There is flexibility in foundation, so that it's suitable for holding companies to be held by a foundation, and you can also have a lot of philanthropic initiatives. We do know of people who decided to have foundations set up because they would like a part of their family money or their wealth to be used towards better causes, etc. Again, big caveat on that, the UAE monitors, regulates any kind of charitable exercise very, very, very closely. You need a special license from the Red Crescent if you are engaging with or doing anything on a charitable note, unless it is to a UAE registered charity like Dubai Cares or Al Noor or one of those Heroes of Hope, etc. So, which is something we support as a firm. We do pro bono advice for Heroes of Hope, which all our team enjoys, and it's sort of like giving back to the community. But you do need to be careful if you are raising money or providing money to any of these ventures, because it is strictly regulated in the UAE. And then perpetual existence, coming back to foundations, perpetual existence, independence of founders or beneficiaries, and it's very flexible in terms of succession planning. Now, the general pros of a foundation are the founder can retain a significant level of control. The other thing I have found in my work is most founders are control freaks. They want to control the narrative, they want to control what their family members are doing, they want to control how their family members are interacting and all of that. And the charter of the foundation, which I was talking about a few minutes earlier, allows you to do that. So you are able to actually write up quite detailed provisions. Like I have one charter where I know that there is one family member who's the CEO of the business and the other family member who's not in the business, but the charter allows that other family member to benefit from the profits of the business and the dividends are distributed accordingly. I have another charter of another foundation where the family decided that no relatives would be allowed, only the immediate family members would work in the family and their spouses, etc., of course, who consider in the family, which again some charters don't, but in this case they didn't want any cousins, uncles, or sort of second removed cousins working in the family business as a rule. So there would be none of those family members would be hired, etc. So you can be quite specific. Obviously, assets are ring-fenced from personal liabilities and family disputes, which is a great thing. So if you put your house in Dubai Hills or wherever you live into the foundation, you put your shares in your family business into the foundation, or you put all your bank accounts into the foundation, you put your property investments into the foundation, for example, there is a transfer fee. So the foundation is not considered part of the family, it is considered a separate legal entity. So you have to pay the full transfer fees to transfer those, or whatever the transfer fees might be in relation to your company for those transfers, but you have to pay that, and then the foundation is actually robust. Now, the other thing I would say, because I was always a little bit skeptical of foundations at the start, and it does remain to be seen whether this remains to be a super robust vehicle, is that the foundation is only as good as the assets you put into it. It cannot protect you by just having a foundation that is an empty shell, which is something a lot of people don't understand. Just because you set up a foundation doesn't mean it's going to work for you. You do need to transfer the assets that the foundation is built to protect, and the foundation is looking at from an asset protection perspective into the foundation. So I hope it's clear. Now, for me, the cons of setting up a foundation is for Muslim clients, structuring needs to still be done very carefully because you don't want to fall foul of Islamic Sharia rules that are for succession and inheritance. Foundations are subject to continuous regulatory oversight and administrative requirements. It's like owning a company or like owning any administrative burden. All kinds of filings that are now coming in because obviously UAE is off the grey list, the OECD and the FATF, the task forces and things like that. So I feel that the compliance of all these things with corporate tax coming in now, with all of the different regulatory requirements around the UAE, that this could be relatively onerous. It's not something to be taken lightly or set up lightly. And the founder transfers legal ownership of the assets to the foundation, not to anyone else. Which zone to choose? I say free zone, but it's really which financial free zone to choose. The IFC, which has global credibility, a mature financial ecosystem, great reputation. I served in the DFSA for a number of years and I saw the framework come up, the robustness of the framework, the seriousness of the framework, the common law aspects to the framework. It's a premium legal and judicial environment, and obviously it's very close to the banks and to everything around you in Dubai. And then ADGM I feel is great because it has lower cost. It also has a very robust regime. And I also feel it's good because a lot of our clients in our ecosystem that we work with have set up ADGM holding companies. They tend to understand the regime. They have already worked in it. They already understand how the regime works and how to do this. And obviously, if you're doing fintech, crypto, digital assets, the ADGM moved on and they have a lot of fintech experts in there who can understand your business plan, who can understand the business and the viability of building funding, etc. might be better in the ADGM if you're in this space. And if you want like a leaner, founder-friendly environment, these are some of the costs. So the foundation costs in the DIFC and the ADGM are broken down. There are ongoing costs to maintaining these, and you must be aware that this is not like a super cheap option at all. And there are ongoing annual costs. So that's the other myth where you set up a foundation and you're good to go. No, there are ongoing costs just like you have with your company. So that's to be borne in mind. And then of course, these are some of the options where we also set up holding companies for clients because they need a vehicle or a corporate structure where everybody working in the family, so you could have two sections of the family, right? One is the section of the family that's engaged in the business, super involved and in the business, and you probably need a holding company with a shareholders agreement, board rights, reserve matter, so that the business can run. And then often this is then held by the foundation, where there are beneficiaries in the foundation, such as maybe wives who are not in the family business, who don't work, or children who moved out and set up their own fintech business or whatever, but are beneficiaries under family business, etc. So that is the distinction that I really like you to understand about that. And as I said, we've set up DIFC and we've set up ADGM. Holding companies in the ADGM are more reasonable to set up, and they have a robust regime, and that's why I said that has been kind of the choice. But the DIFC is a very premium jurisdiction, and many people want to be seen in and work in the DIFC, so it just depends on that. Generally, holding companies don't need to have any offices, because effectively they are not functioning as an operating entity. They would have like a registered office through one of the firms or the corporate service provider, CSPs as we call them, and we provide those services. I just wanted to do a very short comparison of a foundation versus a holding company, just to recap on what I've been saying. A foundation is where you want asset protection that isolates assets from your personal and business liabilities. You need a succession and governance. You don't want shareholders, but you have a purpose-built legal entity. You want confidentiality. So that's the other thing about foundation that I've seen a lot of people are still setting up even business ventures, because there is still an element of confidentiality in foundations, which you don't always get in any entities or holding companies because of the way the law and regulation is moving. As I said, this is time and place now. The confidentiality and the filing requirements around foundations could quite easily change as time moves on. And obviously you want to lock in long-term rules around distribution, inheritance, control. You want an entity that's not easily forced to be dissolved, etc., for disputes. Because what happens in a company is that if a husband and wife are working together, they get divorced, there's a breakdown of communication at work, everything suffers, they go different ways, there are no proper exit clauses, no bad leave or good leave clauses in the holding company area, and then the whole company breaks down. And obviously there is a big issue with creditors, so you have an issue where you're being sued by a bunch of creditors or banks, and you take in big loans, etc. And then on the holding company side, this is a really good vehicle to consolidate everything you're doing, your subsidiaries under it. You want a great commercial operating or investment vehicle. You need to own shares. You might need to divest shares because you have investors coming in. You plan to receive distribution, dividends. You have a great business idea, or you have a great business venture or line that needs to be brought in all together in one kind of structure. And that's exactly it. You want a structure where you can enter contracts, hire staff. Foundations don't hire staff, conduct businesses, raise capital. Often, a lot of the holding companies that we do are companies we set up so that an investor can have a very clean structure for bringing in an outside investor on an M&A or a private equity. And then you want management control, you want directors, you might want non-exec directors. I sit as a non-exec director on certain ventures because they're building something new, they're building something super sexy, they want somebody to help them strategize, etc. Obviously, I will not be a non-exec director in a foundation. That is a closed loop of the people within the foundation, and that it doesn't allow for that. So this is really something related to business, related to investment, related to growth, related to acquisitions, participation, running and operating. The holding companies don't operate, they have operating companies under it, whereas a foundation is something to really protect your assets. So hopefully that's super clear. And then trust funds is when you want flexible estate planning. You have a trustee, and mostly you're worried about the financial aspects or implications of the trust. You want your kids to have a trust fund as they grow up, and they kind of have access to the trust, have monies from the trust, and you want beneficiary support, and you're also happy for the assets to be held by a third-party trustee in this case. So this trust for me really only covers inheritance. Foundation takes it a whole step further to have a succession governance structure that means that things can last forever, and there's a charter that kind of lasts forever. Right, so
These are some common Q&As that I get for succession planning.
Let me just go through these, and then if you guys have more questions, you can always DM me with your questions. What happens if somebody dies without a will in the UAE? You have to remember that the first thing that will happen is assets are frozen and then distributed depending on what happens in your will, if you have one or you don't. Now, the one thing I also want to say to you is that unlike other countries, if you did die, your bank account gets frozen somewhat immediately. We had a terrible and very sad case of a very young person dying in his 40s. In fact, he was late 30s and 40s. And one of the family members said we need to have cash to be able to deal with things. And they took his bank card and they went to the bank account, and it was already locked and frozen. So there is a very high standard of reporting here, and you would end up in a situation where all your accounts would be frozen, and if you did die, you want to make sure that you have the necessary tools for your family to be able to move on and obviously meet the expenses, etc. What is the main difference between DIFC and ADGM wills? The ADGM is, as I said, often seen as more flexible for succession planning than the DIFC, but the DIFC is a great format. As I said, we've been using it and testing it for years. Can I revoke my will or amend it? Yes. You do need to keep your documents current. So if you did have a mirror will with your wife or your husband and you divorced one another, you do need to go and amend your will for sure. And will my UAE will be recognized abroad? Some countries may require a mirror will. As I said, I never recommend properties to be in the UAE will if they're not properties in the UAE. So you do need to be careful around that. Then is it necessary to have both a will and a foundation? Generally speaking, wills deal with your personal and movable assets. Remember my Cartier, Tiffany and Hermes example. But foundations provide long-term control or protection of your family business, for your family, and for many different members of your family. It's very dynamic in its process, so it's much wider than the scope of just a will. How long do these structures last? Wills apply at the time of your death, and foundations have perpetual existence, independent of the founder or the founder's lifetime, which means it lasts much longer. So there you go. This is just a framework of wills and some succession planning for Muslims, non-Muslims in the UAE, what's available, what's trending, what kind of things we've been seeing, and we'll report more as the law moves more and as things move on. Hopefully you found this exciting and helpful, and feel free to reach out with direct messages. Thank you so much for watching and for listening to our podcast today.